we don't really care about these doctrinal issues. Do you think that that's helpful, or do you think that that's an even bigger problem than denominationalism?
I mean, it's dumb.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah.
This is the One Accord Podcast. I'm Joe. He's Greg. That's Eric. And we're here to talk about denominations today. What do you think about denominations? Do you think that having denominations is sin? Do you think that there's a denomination that's got everything right? What's the worst denomination in your opinion? These are things that we're going to be chatting about. And so let's just dive right in. Brother Eric, uh, tell us a little bit, I guess, about your personal context, your history with denominations. Are you currently serving in a denomination? And if so, what is it? And I just, for anybody who's watching, kind of fill us in on your personal denominational context, if you will.
Yeah, I currently serve within EFCER, which stands for Evangelical Friends Church Eastern Region. And that's a relatively small denomination made up of about 100 churches or so. Those churches are all over the world. And so it's a relatively small denomination. And we actually, some people might even be more familiar with the term Quaker, because the Friends Church used to be called Quakers, or they used to call themselves Quakers. And actually, that word was originally meant to be an insult, because it was the conviction of the church that God could speak directly to the individual, and through the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit could speak to the person, and so you could. I mean, obviously, the Friends Church has held the Bible in high regard, but I guess one of their convictions was that God could speak directly to you. And so what the Friends would do is they would actually wait for the Spirit to speak to them during church meetings. And when someone felt that the Spirit was speaking to them, they would get up and they would share with the church what the Spirit had said, or I should say, what they believed the Spirit had told them. And they believed that because of the founder of the Friends Church, whose name was George Fox. He lived in the 1600s, and he was how this all started. He was discontented. He had unrest in his soul over his spiritual condition, and so he would go to all these members of the Church of England, because I guess at the time he belonged to the Church of England, and he was asking the leaders of the church, what should I do, to take care of this problem in my soul? And they gave him answers, but he wasn't satisfied with those answers, and so basically there came a point where he believed God spoke directly to him, and God said, "I can speak to thy condition," is what he said God told him. So it became the conviction of the Friends Church that God can actually speak directly to the individual. And so that's one of the distinctives.
So how does that relate to Quaker?
So
how does that relate to Quaker? You said it was a pejorative.
Yeah. So the Friends Church, they were called Quakers because they would, during their church services, they would wait for the quaking of the Spirit, as I think maybe as they called it. And so because they waited for the movement of the Spirit, the quaking of the Spirit, they were called the Quakers. Not to be confused with.
I thought it was like quacking, the quacking of the Spirit. Like they're all a bunch of quacks.
No, nothing to do with that. Not to be confused with the bizarre group, the Shakers, which died out after a short time. I'm not going to get into their history; it's far too weird. But for our viewers, if you want to learn about a very bizarre Christian group, look up the Shakers online. It's bizarre. So,
well, Eric, we appreciate that. Brother Greg, let's bring you in. How about you? How about your personal denomination history? Are you part of a denomination now? Part of denominations in the past? Anything you'd like to share to kind of give us and our viewers your personal denominational context?
Sure. Yeah, I've actually experienced quite a wide range of backgrounds. I've grew up in a very strict isn't the right word, just a very formal well-structured denominational background with, and I can't remember now. It was either the CRC or the RCA, Reformed Church of America or Christian Reformed Church.
I thought RCA was VCRs. That's
That I thought it was RC Cars, and so I was
Oh,
really
boy.
confused growing up.
We're dating ourselves now.
We really are, yeah. So then, yeah, had that growing up, and even into adulthood, and then left there and helped plant a non-denominational church, and so I've done the very well, very formal denomination, no denomination, and now I'm part of a church, and I don't know all the background, I don't know all the structure, but it's probably like the least formal denomination you can belong to, and I don't even know that they would call it a denomination so much as an association. So it's, if I get in the name right, it's the General Association of Reformed Baptists. So each one of those words would tell you something. I don't really know the difference between particular Baptists and general Baptists, but in general, it's a Reformed Baptist association of churches. And I think the difference between an association and a denomination would be these are a group of churches that that are agreeing to cooperate and have some loose formal association together. They are not a group that has any formal hierarchy. So, we don't have a synod. We don't have a higher ecclesiastical structure that we would answer to. If our church goes dysfunctional, we could call in members from this group, but it's not like they would be brought in and speak in some authoritative way. So it's probably the loosest form of a denomination you can belong to, so far as I know.
Right on. Do they have any authority to like kick you out? Like if your dysfunction was either so dysfunctional, or if you like, is there a set of standards that like at some point you no longer become Reformed Baptist enough to be part of this General Assembly, or do you know where those lines exist, or do they exist?
I don't know. I have to imagine that if we started going wacky enough that it came to their attention, that they have the power to eject us. But yeah, not being in church leadership, I definitely don't know where all those lines fall.
Fair enough. So, you guys shared your denominational history. I'll just briefly talk a little bit about mine, and then, I want to ask basically if you guys think that there's, an advantage to being, you guys are both at least currently in a denomination, if you think that there's advantages to that and then disadvantages. I grew up Roman Catholic, which of course is very hierarchical. Everything goes up to the singular head of the Pope in that church hierarchical designation. When I became born again, I was part of a church that really functioned like a non-denominational church, but it was at least loosely associated with the Southern Baptist Convention. And so we were, happily involved with that for a while. And then I went, we moved down from there. Our family was changing, and we were driving really far to get to that church. So we were looking for a church that was closer to home. We ended up attending, it was some kind of a Wesleyan church. I can't remember exactly what the denomination was, but it kind of functioned more like a non-denominational church. A lot of denominational churches change their names, and they don't have like the denominational name in it anymore. And then when I made my way into actual paid ministry, I suppose, I took a job with a church that had a denominational background, but then they had broke. So they were also non-denominational, but they had in their name kind of a denominational background. So Eric, as you mentioned, you kind of would get mail, you get funny mail and stuff like that. We'd get some visitors that would think that we were part of this denomination, and that particular distinctive, I didn't hold to. So people would be pretty disappointed when they found out that I didn't hold to, that particular distinctive. So it was just an unfortunate thing that the church name still kind of advertised itself as if it was part of this denomination, but officially they were non-denominational. And then, for the past 10 years, I've been part of a church plant that we planted, which is, we call ourselves a Bible church, but we are certainly non-denominational. But it is funny, when you guys think of non-denominational churches, a lot of like the mega churches, or, there's a lot of non-denominational is almost its own denomination, and it kind of has some really strange I don't know, patterns to it, I guess. So sometimes when I tell people that I'm part of a non-denominational church, they think that that means that we've got like fog machines and, that I preach in like skinny jeans and a Hawaiian shirt or something like that. But that's not really the case. Non-denominational churches, of course, can be all over the map. And Greg, you were part of a non-denominational church that wasn't, you mentioned that you guys weren't using fog machines and preaching in skinny jeans and stuff like that. So
No, absolutely not.
they actually probably were pretty close to the Baptist kind of at least model. And I get called a Baptist more than I get called anything else. That's people, instead of calling us, a Bible church, they call it, Baptist, right? Yeah, I'm like, I've been called a lot worse, but no, we're not officially Baptist. So that's kind of my particular background. Do you guys, as parts of a denomination, Greg, I mean, you said you're not really sure how it all works, if they could kick you out, or whatever, like you could call them, maybe that would help. Like, is there benefits in your perspective from being a part of a denomination? If so, what are they?
Yeah, I think there are, well, I think there are benefits to not doing it all on your own, right? I think there are potential benefits to having ties with, associations with, general agreement with other churches who stand together alongside of you. Now, and I'm sure we'll talk about all the dysfunctions or potential dysfunctions or problems that come with denominations. But I think there are a lot of potential good things. Pooling of resources, right? Like if, let's say Howell Bible Church and church I belong to, we agree on enough stuff, we're working together, helping to keep each other accountable. Not that we have authority over one another, but, maybe you're checking in on my pastor and my pastor's checking in on you, and greater unity and fellowship, right? Greater ability to send missionaries if we wanted to. I think there are a lot of potential goods to that.
So how many in your and I'm with you on those. I think those are all good things that you're talking about. How many other churches in the garb are like nearby, or are they kind of spread out all across the nation or around the world?
They are spread around the nation and perhaps the world. Goodness, we had the garb guy for Michigan, in maybe
Michigan
6 months.
garb guy.
Michigan, yeah. Garb guy, Garb, Michigan. And I'm probably pulling this number. There's something like 150 churches in Michigan, I think.
Do you know what the closest one to you is? I mean, roughly speaking.
No idea.
Is it anywhere close, or is it like definitely not it's not in the same town, right?
Again, and the no idea would fall into no idea whatsoever. Yeah, no.
Fair enough. All right. Let me ask another follow-up question to see if you have any idea.
I have no, yeah. If they are, again, so that fellowship, that connection definitely doesn't extend to the common layperson sitting in the church.
Fair enough. So the reason I'm asking that is because all the benefits that you're talking about, do you think that denominationalism is a hindrance, that all the things that you are saying that are possibly a good thing, right? Churches pooling their resources, having fellowship and accountability from various pastors. I'm sure you've got a lot of other churches in town, maybe not other garb churches in town, but would it be better potentially if the pastors within that town were keeping each other accountable and having fellowship and pooling resources or, is it a benefit to say, like, my next, the guy that I can lean on or the church that we can rely on is, again, who knows even where. Whereas I'm sure that, without having to be in church leadership, you're aware of many other local churches that are much closer. You probably even drive by some on the way to go and worship at your particular garb church. So do you think that denominationalism, in seeking some of those benefits, actually causes us to cut off the potential fellowship from others in the area, or maybe not? I guess I don't know.
Not at all. No, of course. Yeah, no, of course. Man, this opens up such a can of worms. Like, okay, so I don't know this to be a fact, but I think I could hit a church from the door of my church if I threw a rock. So I mean, it's literally it's that close.
Be honest, Greg. You throw rocks at the other church building, and you know if you can hit it or
Yeah,
not.
He's
I
known
hit
for
it
that.
well. I've got their window many times. I am.
You guys have
it's my
you guys
thing.
have a once every month that there's a fifth Sunday. It's rock throwing Sunday, and you guys go out and see if you can hit the other building.
So it's one block away, and now I know that we get a lot of crossover. Like, there might be somebody who worships with us regularly, but they have friends at that church, and so they go over there. But as far as doing stuff together, not in my 5 years of attendance and membership at my church have we ever done that. Except for things like, we host an Awana, and I imagine many kids from those churches, or that church in particular, show up at our Awana because we happen to be a little bit bigger, have a little bit more resources. But so no, 100%. If instead of relying on these nebulous associations or denominations, if we started relying upon one another, man, what a beautiful thing that would be. So, yeah, I think it's. It's funny when I think about, and this might be a horrible analogy, I'll let you guys be the judge. When I think about denominations, I often think about the Tower of Babel, right? We're gonna build this big thing, and it's gonna be grand, and it's gonna be wonderful, and it ends up not being that, and then God strikes it and confuses a language. But we're drawn together because when the tower's being built, drawn together. All speaking the same language, and I, analogize that to all thinking generally the same thing, right? We have shared theology, as good or as bad as it may be, and so we all gather together, and we're going to create this denomination, and we're going to just build this denomination. You said you were part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Can't tell. I mean, I listen to guys out of the SBC, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard them talking about the SBC and God's going to build his church, and they mean the SBC.
Yeah.
And so it's these tragic things that have so much potential for good, but so often deserve to be struck down.
Yeah. No, I it sounds to me like, in your opinion, it would be great to keep the benefits of the denominationalism, but it was just, if we were just shared amongst Christians in general. And if, obviously if we have Christians in our region, that we would have, it's hard for me to imagine if an apostle was writing a new letter today, which of course it's not possible. But if it was happening and they sent it to your town or my town, you wouldn't be able to write it to the church in, Grand Rapids, or the church in Muskegon, or the church in Adrian, or something like that. Because, if someone got it, are they going to share it with anybody? There's no, a lot of times there's just no talking between these, between these leaders. And I think we brought it up in our Kingdom of God discussion, but I know I wrote about it in my first book, Gate Crashers, about how denominations we've kind of established these mini kingdoms. And one of my, I don't know, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I was part of the SBC for a while. I was going to this church, and I had signed up to be a part of a disaster relief team that, like when hurricanes and stuff go on, you go and wield a chainsaw for Jesus to cut up trees and clean up debris and stuff like that. And I had never actually gone on a trip. I'd signed up, like just saying, hey, I'm interested. If something like this happens, I'd like to go. And then, I ended up taking this ministry job. And I got a call from somebody, and they're like, hey, we're updating your information, and we'd like to know, like, are you interested in going? And I was like, yeah, I would be considering it. I'd like to go. And I thought we had a great conversation. And then they said, oh, we noticed you moved. Like, where are you going to church now? And I said where I was, working. And there was like silence on the phone for like, I don't know, it seems like a long time, when you're talking, it's probably like 10 or 15 seconds of silence. And then he goes, why aren't you going to a Southern Baptist church? And so, well, the Lord opened up door opportunity, and I feel like I took the opportunity that God gave me to be in ministry, and he goes, well, I can't have you come on the trip. I said, I can't use a chainsaw because I pastor this other, it's a non-denominational church. He goes, well, when you put it like that, it sounds silly, but no. But no, you can't. I was like, all right, well, that does seem silly, we were, to be honest with you, I don't even know if there was even a point of theological disagreement. I couldn't tell you one. By and large, our theology was virtually identical at that time, at least on paper. And certainly our desire to help people who had gone through something bad was the same. And it's not like I was going to go down there and, be pushing some non-Southern Baptist agenda. I mean, I don't even know what was going on. And so that was just like it's like, man, denominations are so goofy sometimes that we have to be so, again, the benefit, yeah, there's a label that says, all right, we're kind of together on a lot of the major issues, but that seems so goofy that we couldn't participate. And I wonder how many times it closes doors. Like there probably are many times people in the same town or in the same city, in the same geography that probably have largely the same agenda. But unfortunately that agenda is they are each trying to grow their individual denominational brand. And as a result of that, we're less effective than we could be.
It surprises me to hear that, Eric, you've expressed in this episode that you disagree on quite or at least some points of what Friends would traditionally hold to, and yet you're still accepted in pastoral ministry. There are times where I've seen, if you disagree, if you don't hold the same eschatological position as the group, you're need not apply. And it's like, so it's at least refreshing. It's potentially refreshing to hear that they allow some deviation.
Yeah,
especially on things like continuationism or cessationism and continuationism. That seems like a big point of disagreement, especially for a denomination that's founded upon hearing audible voices from God. So.
Yeah, and well, what I have liked about the Friends Church is that there is some room for freedom of thought, freedom of conviction. And I really appreciate that. Actually, if you read the Friends Faith and Practice, what you'll find is, like, just take for example, you brought up pacifism earlier. So within the Faith and Practice, there's this paragraph that says something like, Friends traditionally have been pacifists and have been against war. Although there's been Friends that have been conscientious objectors in the military and have been like medics and things like that. But there's another section they added where it says, but there are other Friends who do hold the conviction that there are times when going to war is necessary to protect innocent lives, so on and so forth. So there's some room there for some disagreements, but yet there can be disagreements, but yet we can still be united, on other things. And I'll actually touch on that more.
What's
later.
interesting is,
go ahead.
Oh, what's interesting, like, when you get down to it, every denomination, if you get deep enough into the weeds, you're going to find people who disagree, right?
Of course,
unless you're a cult, you start,
Yep.
But what I'm particularly intrigued by, at least in your situation, is that somebody who's in a position of leadership is allowed to deviate. Because you go, okay, you have a guy who's a conscientious objector or who's willing to go off to fight in the Quaker faith, which traditionally is that pacifist or more, leans towards pacifism. It seems much not only reasonable but much more common that you'd get that down to the grassroots versus somebody who's in leadership. So just interesting.
Yeah, I find it. I find that very refreshing too. And there's other things that they would like. For example, the Friends Church in our Faith and Practice has no official statement on what they believe about eschatology, except that we do believe Jesus will literally return someday.
Christ is coming back. Yeah.
Christ is coming back. So they do absolutely affirm the second coming of Christ, and many other fundamental things. But they don't take, for example, amillennialism over premillennialism. They don't have that specific of an eschatological view, which is really, I think, great, because there can be a diversity of views, as long as they're historical biblical views. But you can have any view that you want, that you think is the right view, and still be within the denomination. And I think, as we'll talk about this more later, I think that's so important that we and it's just easier said than done, of course, but we figure out what are the fundamentals that we have to agree on, what are the non-negotiables, and then what are the I'll call them maybe peripheral things where we can agree to disagree on. And I think if we have a good idea of what the fundamentals are, and we can say, okay, we're going to agree on these, then
There's a
I
danger
think,
there, though, right? Like,
well, there always, of
let's
course, there
let
is, because then
yeah,
then the question
let's
is who gets to
let's lay the
decide what
cards
the fundamentals are.
exactly right, because you have denominations right now that say, well, as long as we agree on the gospel, then everything else is secondary to the point of LGBTQIA plus whatever nonsense being acceptable because hey, that's not the gospel, and all we really care about, all we're pinned on is the gospel and only the gospel. So you can go fall into one ditch going that way, or you can go into if you don't hold every jot and tittle. So there's
Sure,
ditches on both sides of the road there.
there's definitely ditches on both sides for sure, and I respect the Friends Church a lot. It would as it relates to what you just said, because the they were under intense pressure. Well, and really all denominations right now are under intense pressure to conform to uh, society's views on all sorts of things, and particularly, you brought up the LGBTQ situation. So there was a pastor, and I think there was more than one, but there was at least there was one pastor within the Friends Church who sort of changed his views on that, and he went from the conservative view to the view that you can be living in a what the Bible would consider a sexually immoral lifestyle, and still be a Christian. And when the leadership of the Friends Church talked to him about this, they actually asked him to leave the denomination. And the Friends colleges have been pressured to basically promote the LGBTQ agenda and be very supportive of it, and they refused. They refused to do that.
That's
So
good.
it's like they've taken a strong stance on this. Like I said, I'm a part of the conservative branch of Friends, and so they've stood strongly on that. They have not wavered, even when they were risking losing funding, and they really needed the funding. But it's interesting how God provides when you stand your ground and you say, I'm going to stand in the Word of God. I'm not going to deviate from this, no matter what
It's almost like
happens.
he promised to take care of what you needed. Huh. Go figure.
Kind of strange. Yeah, it's unbelievable, but yeah, he did do that. So yeah, that's how I would respond to that.
So yeah, I mean, Eric, you mentioned the problem comes from who gets to decide what's essential, and hopefully, we all agree that the gospel is essential. It's the first and foremost truth, the truth by which we're saved. But then, what becomes important enough to be included as an essential doctrine, and then what isn't? There's been historical creeds over time that people have. I think the SBC just very recently was at their convention. I'm not up on all the details, but debating whether or not they should continue to affirm the Nicene Creed or not, something that's been around for a long, long time. And it seems that as denominationalism has happened, you get people who agree that these things are essential, and then there comes like a very particular disagreement, whether it's about eschatology or continuationism versus cessationism, or the role of women in ministry, or vestment color, or whether or not clergy can wear beards or not, or you get something that someone says, no, this is super important, and then enough people agree that it splinters off into a group that then adds that to their list of essentials. Like, we need
You
to
get
have
that in
this
your church, though, right? Like, there's going to be somebody that's going to argue over the color of the carpet, and
Yeah.
now we got us with the church. So,
And is it a sin for the pastor to not wear a three-piece suit while he's preaching, or Bible translations or whatever else? Like, and yes, it does. It filters down into the body, and who gets to make these decisions? It's very difficult, and it's not a trivial or a trite question. It tears groups apart. People, they break apart because of this. And so some would say, well, denominationalism is a good thing because it allows for people who have distinctions, or people who have maybe some preferences, even preferences for worship, right? Drums or no drums. That sometimes denominational distinctions make it so that you can go and worship God without being distracted or hindered if you're someone who is hindered by listening to someone preach the word of God, even if they're doing so faithfully, but they're wearing a Hawaiian shirt that just drives you crazy, that then you can know that, like, well, if I stick with this denomination, it's much more likely that the pastor will be wearing, a shirt and tie, because I view that as reverent. Whereas if, maybe you don't have the money for a shirt and tie and you don't want people to be looking down their nose at you, you might, veer towards a denomination that allows for a little bit more relaxed dress code so that you're not feeling, judged when you're just trying to go and worship. Some people say, well, that's a good thing. It kind of allows for these preferences to be allowed without causing that constant strain and stress, because it's difficult for people. Like, the reality is, if you don't like drums, you don't like drums. Or if you don't like, Hawaiian shirts, you don't like Hawaiian shirts. And so it's instead of trying to have people lay down those things, you just say, well, you like fog machines, this is the denomination for you. You hate fog machines, this is the denomination for you. You like drums and full bands, this is for you. You like the King James, this is the type, we'll put it right on the sign. We're a King James only church. And I think most people, even if they really stick to their denomination, most people, if you talk to them, they don't think that their denomination is the only one that's going to heaven. Most people don't think that. But certainly some do. Some think that, our denomination is the only one that's saved. But there's a broader umbrella term, Eric, you already mentioned it, evangelical, that seems to transcend most. At least, I'm comfortable fellowshipping with most people who are in that evangelical umbrella, even though they might be in a different denominational thing. Do you guys feel that same way, that there are bigger titles? Again, I'm not on board with every Protestant, but I'm more in fellowship with Protestants than I am with Roman Catholics, for example. And then within Protestantism, I am definitely more in agreement with people who would say that they're evangelical rather than like mainline, the mainline churches. Although there's certainly a lot of variation between evangelical denominations as well. So, it does start to break down at some point. But, do you think that is a benefit, or do you think that that's a hindrance? Growing up Roman Catholic, they talked about denomination. It's sinfulness, right? That maybe we should. Is it a sin that pastors next door to each other never talk to each other, and that Christians don't fellowship, and that we break fellowship over things that are sometimes as trivial as vestment colors and bearded clergy and drums and Bible translations?
I think we have to be very, very careful as we want to label things a sin, because, well, first of all, God decides what's a sin and what's not. And so if we are gathering into different groups based upon pride of preference, I don't think our sin is gathering in different groups. I think our sin is pride, and so we should call pride. But there are also, I'd say, clear instances where this division and disunity can be a righteous thing, right? I believe, not perfectly, but believe that when the Protestant reformers came out of the Roman Catholic Church, that division was a good thing, because they were separating themselves from first and foremost from a gospel that was no gospel at all. And so you can always get this argument: do you reform it or do you leave it? Well, I think it's very easy to judge history in light of your times. But I think there's a good argument to be made for either case, depending on the situation. So it's my conviction that when the Protestant reformers left the Roman Catholic Church, they didn't have much choice, and they did a good thing. Now, could there have been pride? Yes, of course there could have been pride involved. Martin Luther probably at certain points displayed some of that. But was it a sin? I don't think so in that case. However, could there be a sin if I have, for instance, right? It would be very easy for me to get really wrapped around the axle regarding family integrated worship. And so I'm going to talk to a bunch of people in my church, and we're going to, try to reform my church to be family integrated. And when that doesn't work, then obviously we can't worship together anymore. And so I'm going to go start my own church. I think there's sin there. is it the sin of planting a new church? I don't think so. I think it's a sin of pride and arrogance, and not seeking unity, not working through these things in love. And it might not be all my own, right? It could be people on the other aisle playing a part in that.
Yeah.
Eric, what do you think? Do you think it's sinful to have all these denominations, or do you think that the potential benefits outweighs the negatives?
Well, I would let me say this. I think that it's going too far to say that denominationalism is a sin. I don't think I would call it a sin. What I would say is it's not ideal, and the reason I say that is just simply because obviously it's better to be united than not. But I certainly I wouldn't call it a sin, and I think that I can understand why. I know why there's denominations. I mean, it's not a mystery to me. I think it's clear that people tend to associate with others of like mind, of like beliefs, like convictions, things like that. So it doesn't surprise me that there are denominations. Would it be better that every Christian agreed with every other one, and we all had the correct beliefs? Well, of course, it'd be better. But I don't think it's wrong, though, to I wouldn't call it a sin to say that people can worship in their in their distinct groups. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'm a believer that we really should strive for unity. I think unity is very important. And I like what Greg said. He has a, a conviction that family integrated worship is the way to go, but he's not going to force or try and force that conviction on other people. I think we need to be, I think we need to be gracious. And there's a lot of things that I can agree to disagree on with people and still have fellowship with them. No, there are some things I can't do that with. Like if someone says, well, Christ is not going to return, or you're not saved by faith, you're saved by doing X, Y, and Z, then we're going to have some serious problems. We're going to have some serious disagreements. But I think we need to agree to disagree on the lesser things. Although, as we already said, sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between the lesser things and the greater things. But having said all
how
that,
do you make those? Well, can I ask you,
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead and make your point. I'll save my question. Sorry.
Well, I'm kind of going around in a circle here, but my main point is just that I don't believe denominationalism is a sin, although I don't believe it's the ideal situation either. But I do understand why. I understand why there are denominations. It makes sense because Christians don't all agree on everything.
Yeah. Well, that certainly is true. We definitely don't all agree on everything. And so how do we make those decisions? Because, the three of us, we sit here and in theory, I think we're all nodding our head and we go, yeah, I agree. I can have fellowship with people that I don't agree on every single thing. That's evidenced even by our conversations, right? We have fellowship with each other. We consider each other brothers in Christ. We don't agree on every single thing. But you read some of the comments that people give, like we talk about like our King James only conversation, for example. And some people go, nope, this is an issue worth dividing over. This is something where we disagree. So who's right, or how do you make these types of decisions? Obviously, we all think that we're right, and if people disagree with us, they think that they're right. Like that's how it goes. Is there any kind of objective standard? And of course, we'll say the Bible is the objective standard. How do we do these things in integrity and not be sowing discord and not be being divisive or schismatics? Is there an objective standard? And of course, we'll all say the Bible, but everybody says that's the standard, and then of course we come to different conclusions on what that means.
Yeah, that's why I think denominations are inevitable here in Ardamard and in the earth as it stands right now, humanity as it is, Christ having not yet returned. I don't believe there's any way to avoid something that looks like a denomination, right? Now, does that mean you should give yourself wholly over to it? I'm not saying that. But I don't believe we're ever going to get to a point where all of our potential differences are going to be able to be lived with to the extent that you're going to have peaceful unity until Christ returns.
Going back to your question about, how do we determine the distinctives? Because everyone's going to say, well, we use the Bible. Well, if it was that simple, then the problem would already be solved. Of course, it's not that simple. I would actually just give some guidelines for determining the fundamentals. There are things in Scripture where it'll say, if you believe this, you are saved. Okay, I'll give you an example. If you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. Now, the implication is, if you don't believe that, then you're not saved. That would be a fundamental, where if you can't just, there's no way around it. Like if you say Jesus didn't rise from the dead, you are lost. You are not saved. God has not accepted you. You're not in right standing with God. So there are texts like that where they're telling you plainly, straightforwardly, if you believe this, you'll be saved. If you don't believe this, you are lost. So I think we need to.
You think that should be the test?
No, I'm giving. There's several guidelines that I would use. This is one guideline out of many other ones.
Okay.
So
I find that a very simplistic way to. So,
well,
okay,
it
sorry.
is, and if it was just that would sound dumb. I realize that. But
okay.
So there's
Greg was like, it did.
More.
It sounded dumb.
It did sound dumb.
Okay. Well, fair enough. But there's a lot more to it.
You're saying.
No. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying like that bar and that bar alone. And if you said that, I'm going to say, brother,
plural, not singular, not that one.
My apologies.
That's okay. That's fine. So there's several other ones too. Like I think I've said this before. I think we need to, and again, easier said than done, but we need to recognize there are things that Scripture speaks very, very clearly about. And then there are other things that Scripture speaks very ambiguously about. One example out of 1,000 others. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul, in passing, says, you're baptized for the dead, or what do you do with those who are baptized from the dead? Paul gives no explanation of that. Right now, there are about 40 different scholarly interpretations of that one statement. So it would be incredibly foolish to make that a fundamental where we say, okay, well, in order for me to accept you as a believer, you have to believe that we can be baptized for dead people. Okay, that's foolish, because that's one place in Scripture where there's one ambiguous statement that is said in passing and there's no explanation given as to what it means. So I think we need just a more general way of saying what I said earlier. What does Scripture plainly say? And then what are things that Scripture says where disagreements are more understandable? Another thing too is to ask, what has the church historically believed? Because there are doctrines that the church has held for a very, very, very long time. Like, for example, like the deity of Christ. That's something that the church has held for a very long time. Or salvation by grace through faith. That's something that the church has held for a very long time. And again, there's some disagreements about that, but I think there's plenty of agreement. I think there's enough agreement within among most Christians. But
when you say Christians, and I just when you say Christians and when you say the church, I know that there are going to be some people out there who are including within that big umbrella the Roman Catholic Church, for instance. And if we are including them, well, there's some doctrines they've held for even longer than, obviously Protestantism and evangelicalism wasn't around before the Roman Catholic Church. So how big of a role do you include them, and what role does the historical argument play for you if you include them?
So I I'll just say right up front, I am not Roman Catholic. I don't. There's many things that I disagree with
You're a
Roman
Quaker.
Catholics about. Well, that's even misleading. That's misleading. But I know what you're. I know that was a jab. Um, I would say that I think that there are Roman Catholics who who are putting faith in Jesus Christ for their salvation. Now, is there a lot of other stuff within the church that is wrong? Yes. And there are some Roman Catholics that their faith is in Christ, and this other stuff, they're not trusting in this other stuff, but it's just stuff that they do. So I would
Let me ask it more
I would say,
simply. Do you
yeah.
consider the Roman Catholic Church a denomination of Christianity? Is it one of the blend, the same that a PCA or Southern Baptist, Friends, Roman Catholic Church, are they all part of is that denomination part of the umbrella of Christianity as you understand it?
That's not a simple yes or no answer. Because
Really?
I think
Okay.
because I think that, like, I've heard Roman Catholics explain how people get saved, and then I've heard other Roman Catholics give different answers, different responses. I would be comfortable with one group, with the few people that I heard give one explanation. I would be very uncomfortable and even say with the other group, I can't do that. I can't hold that position. I can't be comfortable with that position. So I don't think, for me, it's not just a simple yes or no answer. And there's Protestants who would say water baptism does save you. Like, you have to be water baptized in order to be saved. That's not just only a Roman Catholic view, although they would add the infant part to it. But there's a lot of unpacking that needs to be done to answer that question.
Yeah,
so I don't
fair
think
enough.
it's a simple yes or no question. But anyway, I don't even remember what I was talking about before. But it's a tough. That's why, Joe, I said to you before the show even started, I said these questions for me were harder to answer than I thought, because I don't think it's just simply, well, it's black and white. I don't think all these answers are just simple black and white yes or no answers. So I've wrestled with some of this stuff over the years. But I know I was talking about how do we determine the fundamentals? And I think there's just his church history, um, the can we agree on what Scripture clearly says? I think we can come to a lot of agreement on that, and that's why I think no Catholic person, for example, would say Jesus did not rise from the dead. They would say, yes, he did rise from the dead. Every Protestant would say that I would consider Protestant or a genuine Christian.
Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons would also say that.
True, but remember, there's not just one fundamental. I think there's more fundamentals than just one. There's probably a list that I personally would have.
I don't disagree with any of your criteria at this point. I'm only going to say that every one of those criteria are still subjective in nature, which is part of the problem, which is why I say that denominations are essentially unavoidable.
Well, and I would agree with you.
Do you think when you say that they're unavoidable, I know you said that, until the Lord returns. Do you think that, especially in a context that, Christians are so comfortable that we have freedoms and we're not being persecuted? Because I think, like, in places where Christianity is persecuted, the problem of denominationalism, so to speak, seems like it kind of disappears a little bit. Like, there's a lot more unity, I think, in places where people are severely persecuted. I don't think in Iran, you have all these as many denominations as we do, here represented. And
Sure.
even if you do, I think that they are much more Like, I don't think that they would be so focused on saying, well, I can't have fellowship with this Christian that's like living next door or in my town. I have fellowship with some nebulous, grouping of Christians that are scattered across this vast geographical area. I think that they're much, much more tightly bound because of the nature of persecution.
Yeah.
Persecution tends to clarify what is actually essential and what is not in many areas. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think that that's overstated?
Yeah, no, 100%. Will completely grant the idea that there are, call them environmental conditions that make humans predisposed, more or less predisposed for division and disunity, right? People in my house can disagree on something and until the electricity goes out, and then we all agree what's important is having electricity and having running water. We're not so worried about what TV show we're going to watch. We don't really care, right? And so, yes, things like persecution can definitely narrow your concerns. But I think based upon our fallen state, we're always going to find things, given enough opportunity, I think we're always going to find things that are going to cause us to want to disunify, which to Christ's glory is what's so amazing about what he's going to do when he restores us. I don't believe, I believe there are people today who I would not sit through one of their church services. I wouldn't participate, but that I believe someday they are going to be adopted fully, and I will be adopted fully into the kingdom of God. We will both receive our glorified bodies, and we are going to worship for eternity completely unified. Only Christ could do that, and I look forward to that. But until then, we will find something to split over, more or less.
I'm not sure that all, because I agree with that, and I don't know that all disagreement is the same as disunity. I can have I like your household analogy. I can have disagreement with people in my house about certain things, but we're still unified. If my wife and I are trying to figure out where we want to go for dinner, and she wants Mexican and I want to go get a hamburger or something, we're still in unity about the main thing that we want to go and eat together. We're just not in agreement about exactly what
my point is, given enough time, and not both, and both of you not being unified under Christ, I think given enough time, you're going to go to war over Mexican or hamburgers, and I pray for her side of the argument. So,
yeah,
I love hamburgers.
Greg. You always take her side. No,
I do.
Yeah. How dare you? No, I'm just kidding. We all know that hamburgers is the right choice. Anyway, the main point, I think, is I don't know that it has to go to war over that. Like, I think that if we're humble, you talk about the sin of pride, right? So if we're humble, if we love one another, and that's a preference issue. Hopefully we're willing to lay down our preference. The problem is, especially like you live in a culture where we're so comfortable, then it becomes like our right, it's our right to be offended about things. It's our right to assert that our preferences are the most important thing. And that's why I think persecution clarifies. Like if we're in some war-torn area and we don't have all these choices between Mexican and hamburgers, it's just, are we going to eat or are we not?
Rats or squirrels.
Right. It starts to narrow down really what's even worth fighting about. And we're not going to fight about that because we're trying to survive. And I think that is one of the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest downsides of denominationalism. I appreciate the clarity that's come from church history, from church councils, and when people can get, even these crises of faith, people get together and they have these rigorous theological conversations. That's why I enjoy talking with you guys. I want to have rigorous theological conversation. I don't just want to sit in an echo chamber. I want to, if you view things differently than me, I want to hear your perspective and examine it from that perspective. And I'm not trying to prove you wrong. I'm trying to say, okay, does this make better sense? That's what my hope is. And it might sometimes seem like I'm trying to prove you wrong, and sometimes maybe, I'm just, for whatever reason. But hopefully if we love each other, we're willing to continue having those conversations. I think denominationalism, it ends the conversation. And, I've seen that. People are like, I don't want to talk about this. If you think that way, that's the denomination for you. Go talk to them. And it's just a conversation ender. The conversation's over. This is what we think. This is what you think. And we then have these denominations that are just like, instead of us talking about, um, we talked about it in our music episode. Music can be so divisive, right? It breaks my heart that some people are bothered by drums and other types of things like this, but they are, and so I want to hear that concern. And then, but what do you do when you have somebody who's like, they want to use their gifting to serve God, and it includes doing something that irritates people, right? What do you do when David is making a fool of himself dancing for the Lord, and he says he'll become even more undignified than this, right? I mean, what do you do with those types of divisions? And it breaks my heart, especially when I read statements in Scripture. John's Gospel, Jesus says that people will know that you're my followers by your love for one another and by your unity. And then we disunify, and the world the world just drives by and sees all these different denominations, and they know we don't talk to each other. Whereas in Jesus's initial group, he had a tax collector and a zealot, and then in the early church, you got Jews and Gentiles. I mean, you talk about some cultural divides, and by them coming together, it made such a powerful statement that denominationalism has largely destroyed. We've got the Democrat denominations and the Republican denominations, and we got Black church and white church and Korean church and Hispanic church, and like it's so divided, it's so segmented that the world, I think, looks at it and goes, you guys don't agree. You're just like everybody else. You just, you have your social groups that, you listen to the types of music you want to listen to. You call it worship music, but it's just, various styles of music. And I don't know, that to me is the biggest downside of it, that I wish that if there wasn't denominations, maybe we just got to sit and figure this out. Like my wife and I, if we're sitting, like, we're not just going to go hungry, both of us, and not eat. I suppose some people think, well, we'll just get divorced if we can't figure out what we're going to eat, But my wife and I, we're not going to get divorced. We're going to figure something out. We're going to come up with some solution that works. And I kind of wish we could get back to that, where sometimes these conversations are painful. Sometimes it's annoying. We've gone through that, right, as a group, where sometimes we have these conversations like, I don't even want to talk about this anymore. But sometimes you just need to take a couple of deep breaths, maybe give it a little room to breathe. But then say, we're going to talk about this again. You know why? Because we love each other, and unity matters enough that we don't want to just say, well, you know what, why don't you go over there and I'll go over here, and maybe we'll see each other in heaven someday. Like, I don't know. That's a heartbreaking scenario to me.
Amen to all that. And I just don't see, again, except for the return of Christ, I don't see how that's scalable. Like the three of us, we can sit here and we can aim for all of that, and Lord, help us do that. But I have so little confidence in man that I go, I don't see how you're going to get a group of 1,000, a group of 10,000, a group of 100,000 to exercise the humility enough that it takes, especially once all those 10,000 points of view and perspectives and preferences come in. I wish it would. I just don't think it's what's promised.
When it gets simple, when it gets simply down to it, you just think people just don't want it enough to go for it. Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding what you're saying? Because why can we do it, and why isn't it scalable? Like, I mean, we want to do it, but is it just that people just don't? I mean, it seems to me that means it's a lack of love and a lack of. Yeah, I don't know.
I agree. I agree that it's a lack of love. What you're talking about is enough sacrificial, loving, humble maturity to scale. And maybe you get that out of 100 people. Maybe you get that out of 300 people. But which is part of why I'm probably not a post millennial, right? Like I just don't see it happening this side of Christ's return. But maybe that makes me a pessimist. Maybe it makes me a realist. I don't know. I want to be an optimist, but I know enough people, and I know enough Christians to go, I don't see that level of maturity long term, even in myself. I won't even even in myself, I'm not sure that I have what it takes to create that here and now.
What is interesting to me, and I'm being, just kind of transparent about my own circumstances, but I know that uh, I have a higher tolerance, and I'm much more willing to like hear you guys out because I know you. I've served together with you. I've gone witnessing with both of you guys. I've had opportunity to study the scriptures with you, and so I have a pretty high tolerance that when we disagree, because I know you as men, I'm willing to hear you out. And you guys seem to afford that same opportunity for me. And I will admit, when I don't know somebody, it's much harder for me to at least immediately offer that same kind of um, charity, maybe, and if I find myself disagreeing with somebody, then I have zero relational equity. I am quicker to, I am quicker to try and say, well, look, you're clearly wrong about this, and I'm not as interested in continuing the conversation. And I wish that wasn't true, but I find that, that to be the case. I can't go along with everybody. It's just if I if I tried to find agreement with every single person who disagrees with me, my goodness, as it turns out, especially if you're a teacher,
it's exhausting,
right? Well, if you're a teacher of any kind, you're gonna people seemingly almost come out of the woodwork to disagree with you. It seems. And I have expressed, I think I can say this in integrity, that I have almost always, if not always, but probably there are times that, there probably have been some exceptions where I've expressed a willingness to continue the conversation longer than most people are willing to endure with me. And that doesn't mean that I just sit down and agree with people all the time. I mean, I have a
but that's a
reputation
personality. That's a
for being
personality trait, right? Like the ability and the willingness to be disagreeable, and I don't mean like you're trying to find, but like to sit and disagree with each other. Not every person has that disposition, and so
Yeah.
you are somewhat of an anomaly.
Well, I am definitely willing to sit for a long time with someone who we disagree vehemently, and I'm. That doesn't mean that I know I've irritated you guys in conversations, but I'm at least willing to sit and be irritated by you for a very long period of time, and hear what it is that you have to say. And I'm like, I cannot believe that you're saying the things that you're saying, but I'm willing to receive that. And I appreciate that you guys have been willing to receive that from me. I know that, I irritate people an awful lot when we disagree. And so I understand why people don't like it. It is easier to just say, you know what, enough of this. Why don't you go over there in that building? I'll stay over here in this building. We'll just, we'll be cordial. We'll kind of pretend like we like each other. We'll, through gritted teeth, we'll wave at each other and pretend like we generally like each other. But otherwise, we just stay away from each other. I understand that. But in love, I wish we could break down. I wish we could break down the denominational borders. I wish, the Roman Catholic Church, I don't think goes all the way back to the beginning. I think that's a historical lie. Certainly, I think that the biblical position of salvation by the grace of God through faith alone in Christ alone, some of the things that were recaptured in the Reformation, those are biblical positions that got lost along the way. And so it doesn't matter how far back we go, just because something has been believed wrongly for a long time doesn't make it correct. And the New Testament, for example, wouldn't exist if everybody, even within the lifetimes of the apostles, got everything right. I mean, we wouldn't have a New Testament if all the early church practices were right things. They were clearly wrong. That's why we have a New Testament in the first place, was to correct early errant practices. And so, the Bible as the sole source of authority does make sense. The problem is just, we don't all agree on what it's emphasizing. And, there are denominations that do split over baptism for the dead, for example, or, all sorts of things that we talk about, because if the Bible mentions it, even in passing, you could make a case that, well, it's biblical. And if you deviate from this, you're being unbiblical. And I don't want to have fellowship with you unbiblical heretics who disagree with my very particular interpretation of this particular view. And I mean, when you start to look at like denominational statements, a lot of times it's like, okay, we agree. That's it. That's the thing right there. I knew it. I knew you, believed this wrong thing about this passage here. And a lot of times we're not even willing to talk about. Greg, you and I have mentioned this. You asked me before why I'm not a confession, why we don't have a confession, and, you and I probably wouldn't be friends if I had a confession, because when we met each other, I wouldn't have passed your test. I would have been, I would have been filtered out by your rigorous, at the time, probably not now today,
Yeah.
but back when when we actually became friends, the filters that you had, if I had a confession, it would have been different than your confession, and I probably would have been filtered out. We probably wouldn't have fellowship. So
probably right.
we're friends largely because I had a more wishy-washy doctrinal statement, not because I am wishy-washy doctrinally, but because I don't include every one of my personal, like I do have eschatological beliefs, but I tend to then settle kind of like where Eric's confessional statement is as long as we can agree that Jesus is coming back, I'm not going to put premillennial, dispensational, eschatological views in like a 10-page paper on my eschatology statement. I'll stick for one paragraph that says that Jesus is coming again in the future.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah, no, 100 for sure. For me, I part of my maturity process has been that going, you know what, I still appreciate and still enjoy confessional statements. I think it would be worthwhile for every Christian, every mature Christian, to sit down and wrestle through like creating their own confession statement. I think that would reveal a lot to you and be good for you. But yeah, their usefulness is not as specific as I would have once said.
Eric, you've been quiet for a bit. You got thoughts on this?
Yeah. Going back to something you said earlier, I think it's a myth to say, unless you agree with everything, unless you agree on everything, you're not united. That's just simply false. That's just not true. You don't have to agree on everything to be united. Um, you know, I'm me and like going back to what you said, me and my wife are united. Do we agree on everything? No, but we agree on enough where we're in unity. The church doesn't have to agree on everything in order to be united. In Romans chapter 14, Paul's talking to Jewish and Gentile believers, and the Jews, because they grew up under the law, they they believed that God still, even after they got saved, they believed that God still required them to eat kosher food and to follow the Jewish calendar. The Gentiles didn't hold those convictions because they, for one, it's not required according to Paul, and because they didn't grow up under the law. And so, rather than saying you guys have to agree on everything, otherwise you're not united, he said, you guys need to accept each other. Yes, you have different convictions. You're to respect each other's convictions, and you're to accept each other as brothers. So that was what Paul said in Romans 14. So clearly, we don't have to all agree on everything in order to be united. We can be united on more fundamental things and have disagreements on more, peripheral, lesser things. So that's what I would say. I just don't think it's accurate to say if you don't agree on everything, you're not united. And
Yeah.
I think we should strive for unity. I think we should strive to be as united as we can be. While I understand why denominations exist, I also, I sometimes it's, sometimes when you join a denomination, of course, you take on a label. It's like, as Greg has said multiple times, he doesn't like labels, and I really don't either. Although I think they sometimes can be helpful, but I think maybe they do more harm than good. So, because when you have a label, when you say I'm a part of X denomination, it's like, oh no, I can't go there, and I can't have fellowship with you. So I really believe that I think the church might be more united than people think. Now, does it appear that way? Well, I can understand why people would say, no, it does not appear that way. But every Protestant believes Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. Every Protestant believes, well, at least I'll say this: if you don't believe that Jesus is going to return in the future, I think Scripture's pretty clear. You're outside the church. You know, you're you
Eric
you
doesn't have
cr-
fellowship with preterists.
No,
Full
you
preterists.
cut
not
off
with full
preterists.
preterists. Not with full preterists. I just can't do that. I can't. I think that
Yeah.
crosses biblical lines. Um,
You know,
so I go ahead, Greg.
oh, I was going to say, you know, denominations are a lot like labels. You and I agree. Labels are generally have the potential to be unhelpful, yet they are helpful. There's a denomination, CREC, Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. It's kind of a unique thing in that, as far as I understand it, you can be a conservative, Reformed, Presbyterian, baby dunker, or you can be a Reformed, confessional Baptist, non-baby dunker, and you're still. Glad I got a chuckle out of that.
Well, usually people talk about pedo baptism or whatever. You're a baby dunker. I like your more less scholarly term, more popular term, baby dunker.
Baby dunkers. And they have found a way, or are finding a way, to be in a denomination together. And my point is that at some point, I think we have to give a little bit of credit to the denominations, because what it is a label. It's saying here, it's putting some sort of bounds, right? It's putting a fence around, here's what we believe and here's what we don't believe. Now, to some extent, it's good to have a fence that covers a big area. Dunking babies or not dunking babies, we can still be in unity together. Great. At some point, that fence lets in too much, right? Yeah. We can have LGBTQIA plus female pastors. Well, we had to set the fence somewhere, and the fence says nah. So it's good.
Yeah. No, this culture that we've inherited of denominationalism is just part of the, Greg, you use that term. It's just in the water, and people just there's no way to get away from it now. And I often, my heart breaks when I'm out witnessing or whatever, and somebody's like, I already go to church somewhere over here, and sometimes I'll be like, well, okay, I'm not trying to get you to come to my local church, especially if I'm in like some other area. Like, I'm not trying to get you to like come to my state or my county or whatever. I'm trying to point you to Christ. And if you're a believer, then that means that we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And there's like no interest in the they're like, I already go to church. Right. Yeah. Being a Christian means more than just sitting in a building on Sunday morning. Like, that's not, I've used this analogy, sitting in a church doesn't make you a follower of Christ any more than sitting in a tree makes you a banana, right? I mean, it's just, that's not what being a Christian means. And sometimes when you're witnessing, people are like so excited. They're like, oh, you're talking about Jesus. Like, I believe in him, and you can have like a nice fellowship and conversation. Then eventually you get to it, like, oh, what church do you go to? And like, oh, I go to this church. And somebody else like, I go to this other church. And they're different denominations, and it hasn't been a problem at all. But for the most of the people that you talk to, we have, even without realizing it, these labels become our identities. And it's not about us being in Christ. It's kind of like what Paul was talking about with the Corinthian believers. I'm of Cephas, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Paul, I'm of Jesus. And I don't know, it's so divisive and heartbreaking. And I think it is a conversation ender. I think it is a fellowship disruptor. And that's not to dismiss all the other helpful things that, like, again, if I'm, as a label goes, if I'm looking for somebody that I very quickly am going to say, like, how much common ground do I have this person, at least doctrinally, the labels are really helpful. I mean, if I'm looking for, if I'm in a new town and I don't know where to go, I certainly have certain denominational people that'll end up at the top of that list and some that'll be at the bottom of the list. And, I have a filter. There are some that won't be on the list at all. These are people that I'm not, there might be some believers in that group, but at least officially we're not talking about the same thing. And, I would put Catholics on that list. I don't think that Catholics believe the same gospel. I think that the Protestant Reformation was a big deal. I think the fact that Catholics wanted to kill Christians and, keep the scriptures away from people.
Not only did.
Right. I have a long memory for that. And I was in a pastoral meeting, with some people, and one of the pastors said, I have no problem sending, people to any of your churches. And I, had to be the annoying guy and said, well, quite frankly, I do. And, I would never, I was sitting next to a Roman Catholic deacon. I said, all due respect to you, you seem like a nice guy, but I would never under any circumstances send anybody to you unless they were telling you to repent. Like there's no way I would send someone to you, to your fellowship, to think that this is the same, because we're not talking about the same things. We just aren't. And I mean, do you disagree? Like, of course we're not, right? I mean, there's a huge difference between our theology. It's the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. I've known plenty. I think they're nice people. I wouldn't mind living next door to one. I don't think that they're going to like, kill my dog or break into my house or, be weird or something. But we're not believing the same thing. And even when we say that we believe Jesus rose from the dead, we got to dig in and say, what is the nature of Jesus? Now you get those other things, like, is Jesus actually divine? Is he part of the triune Godhead? And so we all have these distinct, these lines that are somewhere. And, of course, I think I'm right, and others who disagree with me, they think they're right. And that's the problem, and hopefully we love each other enough to try and at least hear each other out. I've had some wonderful conversations with I had some Mormons that I knew for a while when I was growing up, and we had a lot of great conversations. We didn't come to agreement. I always want to be willing to hear people out in love. I want to be able to, genuinely hear their perspective. And when it comes to biblical interpretation, be able to see that. But that also doesn't mean that I want to swing to the other side where now I'm going to seek unity for the sake of unity. And that kind of gets my next one. Like, what do you guys think about the ecumenical movement? Just trying to have unity around unity for the sake of unity, where we just don't really care about, we don't really care about these doctrinal issues. Do you think that that's helpful, or do you think that that's an even bigger problem than denominationalism?
I mean, it's dumb.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's, chasing after the wind, right? Like, either God said something or he didn't. And if he did say something, and he did, then we need to take what he said seriously. So the idea that we can go, well, what he said about unity, regardless of what he said about everything else, is the only thing that matters. Well, I don't believe that. And Scripture doesn't bear that out, right? Why did Paul rebuke Peter? Because Peter was wrong. Did Paul go, well, he's wrong, but I'd rather not ruffle Peter's feathers. So no, Paul said, I called him out in front of everybody. I made it known that he was wrong. And because he's a Christian, he accepted the rebuke, and we were then, not only unified, but there was peace between us. So the idea that idea of, let's just create the biggest umbrella we can and all just sit underneath it while, as far as I'm concerned, fire and brimstone's raining down on top of you, that's a bad idea.
Yeah. Now, truth by its very nature is exclusive. And, to say that we're in unity with people that think that 2 + 2 is 4, and then others that think 2 + 2 is 5, and others that think it's 3, we're not really in unity. And so to pretend that we're in unity, or to pretend, like that we just, singing Kumbaya, can't we all get along? Well, I hope we can get along. I don't want to, kill each other or go to war with each other. But at the same time, to pretend that people are correct when they are incorrect is not helpful. And I don't want people to do that for me either, right? I want, if I'm the one who's in error, I would want people to love me enough to try and endure with me long enough to try and help me see the error of my ways. And I think that's what Peter's, he probably didn't like being rebuked publicly, but I think that he had the overall greater desire of saying, what, Christ's reputation is more important than my reputation. And so if I'm wrong, and if I'm leading people astray, I would rather be rebuked so that I can repent, and so that I can actually come in line with the truth. And I think that that's a large part of what we're lacking. So I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think we could do to increase unity? I don't think it's just saying, well, none of these distinctions matter, let's fly into ecumenicism. But maybe we've already hit on it. I mean, if we were more humble and more loving and more patient, maybe that would increase it. Is there anything else we could do to increase unity? I mean, I don't know that we'll ever get rid of denominations. Greg, I think I'm with you. Unless persecution comes and wipes them all away. I mean, but is there anything we can do in the meantime?
Destroy them all but mine, and then we'll be happy.
That's right. But is there anything we can do to try and increase unity, in your opinion?
Eric, go first. you jump into these waters?
Well, I'll just say some of the things I said earlier. I think one of the things is figuring out maybe just for ourselves as individuals, um, what are the fundamentals for me, and then what are the things that are that are not worth fighting about. So, like again, just a few examples. For me, I'm not going to go to war over someone who holds a I'll say a different view of eschatology than me. Like, Joe, you're a great friend of mine. You're premillennial. I hold the amillennial view. I have no problem with that. I think the premillennial view is a respectable view. I think that's something we can agree to disagree on and still have fellowship and have no problems at all. I think, like, we talked about, election and who exactly is chosen. Is this a group? Is this individuals? Um, I can have fellowship with somebody who holds a different view of election. Now, if we're talking about, like, did Jesus rise from the dead? And someone says, well, no, he didn't. Well, I believe he did. And I believe if you don't believe that, you're lost. Because I believe the resurrection of Christ is a fundamental thing. I think Scripture is abundantly clear. That's why the church has held this view for all of its history, because it's just that clear and that obvious to me and to everybody. So yeah, I think just for me, I've had to over the years decide, okay, what are the non-negotiables and what are the negotiables? So I have some things in both of those baskets, I'll say. So and in doing that over the years has really helped me to be more. I hate the word inclusive because that's just such a nasty word these days because it can have bad it can leave a bad taste in people's mouth. But for me, I've figured out, okay, what are the things that I'm going to die believing, and what are the other things where I can go, I can live with people who are who are in disagreement about that. So that's, for me, that's the way that I've approached it.
Yeah, I think the most practical thing that you can do, or give two the most practical things, right? Prayer and submitting yourself to the Word of God. I think, and by submitting yourself, what I mean is being willing to put aside your presuppositions, drive out of your head all of the, quick responses and beautiful formulas that you've been given by all of your favorite teachers, and actually put your eyeballs on the entire text of Scripture from Genesis to Revelation. See what God has said, because he has spoken. Look at where God is placing the stresses. You hear today, oh, the Bible speaks quietly about sexual sin. No, it doesn't. That's just some bozo's opinion. It doesn't. So stop listening to bozos and instead listen to God.
That's good advice right there. Stop listening to bozos.
Stop listening to bozos. There's your cold open. Stop listening to bozos. And then out of that, because what we're really talking about is the less we're dividing, the more Christ-like we're being. The more we are being sanctified, the more we are maturing in Christ, the less we're going to want to fight about whether or not we dunk babies. Now, is there an argument? Is there a reason to sit and have thoughtful, biblically driven, biblically informed conversations about whether we baptize babies or not? Yes, there is reason to talk about that. But does that need to divide us, or in our maturity and in our love and our being informed by the Bible and being led by the Holy Spirit, can we do that while being unified?
Yeah. It's interesting, my experience, of course, I'm just speaking from my very limited perspective. There are certain people in my life that when we have these spirited conversations and we talk about these things, that it actually drives us closer together. And then there's others that it it just puts a wedge in between us. And I don't always know why that is, and I don't want to, jump to conclusions necessarily. I look at like Paul and Barnabas, they had a sharp dispute and it seemingly drove a wedge between them. And I don't want to just jump to the conclusion and say, well, if it drives a wedge between us, that must mean that this other person, is, not a true believer or something like that. But maybe younger in my life, I would have said something like that, but I'm not sure why that is. But I do know that the people that usually that the wedge comes, at least in my experience, just speaking from my perspective, often we're not really doing the Christian life together. We're maybe just talking about Christian things, and I'm frustrated by that when Christianity just becomes an intellectual exercise, where we think that we're so serious about Christianity because we've studied the doctrines, and we've come to these positions, and we have all these, passionate thoughts. And a friend of mine, Scott, who I think it's John Wesley. I might be getting it wrong. He's usually the one that quotes it, but I think it's the John Wesley that said something along the lines of, that I need to realize that when I'm passionate about something and I'm talking about somebody else who's passionate about this same theological issue, but they disagree, that it is possible that I'm the one who's in error, that they've maybe put in some rigor, and maybe I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm wrong. And I think I'm right, just like they think they're right. But what if I'm the one who's wrong, And I think even just being willing to admit that, like maybe it's me. And yet with the people in my life that I know who are trying to, like, I don't want to have coffee house Christianity, if that makes sense, where we just sit together and we theologize, and then we don't actually do any of it. Whereas the people in my life where it's like, okay, well, Greg, how you and I met, we're on a witnessing trip. And so we're out witnessing. We're trying to, the Bible says go out into all the world and preach the gospel to all of creation. We're like, all right, well, we're going to try. And then we can sit down and over a meal, maybe we disagree about certain things. At least we're trying to do Christianity together. And so those kinds of conversations have brought us closer together. And over time, it's not like we're out witnessing every moment of the day or we're out serving together every moment of the day, but those shared experiences, I think, in our relationship, when we have disagreements, even if it's frustrating or annoying, it still drives us closer together. I mean, we're closer now as friends than we were 10 years or 15 years ago, however long it was when we met each other. At least I think. Maybe you like me less now than you did before. I don't know. I like you more now at this point. So, I think the willingness to get off the page and into practice would be a big help. And I think even within denominations, a lot of times people, their only real experience with each other is we just sit in the same building on Sunday mornings and we listen to the same religious flavored conversation. But are we actually putting these things into practice together? Like that I think is a big aspect of trying to drive us towards unity. That, let's say I was allowed to go and wield a chainsaw with the Southern Baptists, they would have found that we could have a little bit of unity because we can serve together. We can roll up our sleeves, we can get our hands dirty together, and we don't have to be divided simply because of these labels. And sometimes that's really hard. It's really hard to get people that'd be willing to do that. But for those who are willing, it's a beautiful thing to realize, like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're wrong. We're probably both wrong about at least something. So as we try and at least do the things that we know we have to do, that we know we should be doing, now let's talk about the things that we disagree on, and we do so lovingly. If we become on too strong, maybe we ask for forgiveness, say, hey, I'm sorry, I got too animated about that. I'm passionate about this because it's important, but, I want to keep on, talking about this with you until that agreement, but at least until we're both satisfied, like, okay, I can see where you're coming from. And maybe I just, a lot of times, maybe that is the resolution. Like I can at least see where you're coming from. That's a big statement, because sometimes you just can't, because we've learned our answers and we only talk to people who disagree. And, anybody who's not our position, they must be idiots or devoid of the Spirit or something else. Like if I can at least see where you're coming from, that goes a long way in humanizing one another and allowing us to have fellowship. I guess that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm with you that a number of years ago I would have looked and said, wow, you're obviously just not a Christian or just not saved. But but I do want to give the grace because there are people out there that the idea of sitting down and looking someone else in the eye and saying, here's why I think you're wrong. And there are people out there that are seemingly nearly incapable emotionally of, and not even because they're sinful, just God hasn't wired them to do that. And so I want to have grace for those people. Because let's face it, people like the three of us, we have trained to look at each other in the eye and say, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And hopefully to do it in a mature way. But that takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of strength.
Yeah. No, I know even if sometimes people watch this conversations, I know like Eric and I in particular have, like we're not hurting each other's feelings, but sometimes people look at the way we talk and like, you guys are being rude to each other. Like, why? I don't feel like Eric's being rude to me. Eric, you can say if you think I'm being rude to you, but I think
every day.
No,
I apologize.
No.
But I think the kindest thing that I can do if I disagree with you is just tell you to your face that I disagree with you. And I'm not trying to be rude to you. I view that as an act of love. If I would expect that if people think I'm wrong, that they just tell me, hey, Joe, I think you're wrong. Like that. I appreciate that kind of direct.
But
honesty.
a lot of people,
they don't.
That
right.
terrifies them,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. No, they'd rather go and just say it quietly, to other people behind their back. I'm like, I don't want to gossip. If I got a problem with you, I'll just tell you right to your face, Eric, you're wrong about this stuff, and here's why. And when you think I'm wrong, maybe I am. Obviously I don't. Greg, you said a long time ago, it's hard for me to operate from the premise that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I tried to encourage you to say, well, can you at least operate from the premise that you could be wrong? And
sure.
I want to operate from that premise. Of course, I don't think I'm wrong. But if I am wrong, I'm thankful that I have at least some people in my life, like you, friendly gentlemen, who can say, hey, Joe, you're wrong. Or at least I think you're wrong. And then I can say, okay, well, let's hear what you got to say. So I don't view that as rude, but I understand why people watching it, especially some of our earlier ones. Quit interrupting him. Let him talk. Well, I think he's wrong about this, and I don't want to hear what he says after this, because if he's wrong about this part, I got to tell him he's wrong about this part.
Right.
But
yeah,
anyway.
let me just say one thing about that, because that's important. As we're talking about this stuff, people are hearing me say, we really should be united, and we need to figure out what we can agree to disagree on. But I want to make it very clear that I am very, very concerned about the truth. And I would put it like this. I do appreciate and share the desire for unity among Christians. Jesus himself prayed, and you mentioned this earlier, Joe. Jesus prayed that believers may all be one, John 17:21. However, when truth is compromised for the sake of unity, then it's gone too far. And so our beliefs do matter. The truth does matter. Paul said that the church is the pillar and support of the truth. 1 Timothy 3:15. So if the church is supposed to be supporting the truth, and truth is being set aside for the sake of unity, then the church has ceased to be the church. So I actually hold truth to be very, very important. I'm certainly not suggesting we just throw the truth away and go, well, it doesn't matter what we believe as long as we're getting along. Truth absolutely does matter. And so I want people to know that I think, like with the ecumenical movement, you mentioned that earlier, it can go way too far where we just go, well, the Bible says this, but it's unity is more important than what the Bible says. No, it isn't. And so I think we need to be as united as the Bible is calling us to be, but not so united that we're just ignoring what the Bible says, because that's a circular way of going about it. So I would just say that, and
especially when you get into things like the gospel, right? Like Paul, let them be cursed.
mm-hmm.
I wish they would mutilate them. I wish they'd
emasculate themselves. Yeah.
Emasculate. I wish they cut. Yeah. And then we go and we read that, and then we go, yeah, these people who preach a completely different gospel, yeah, no problem, big tent, big umbrella. See, look at us, we're being unified. No, I think you're being sinful. I think much of the ecumenical practice there, I think, we could say it's just as sinful as denominationalism, if we want to examine it carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to,
Now, Paul rebuked the Corinthians in both of his letters, about warning them against idolatry, seemingly having that kind of golden calf mentality, right? Calling our golden calf by the name of the living God. And then in 2 Corinthians, he went back to it and said, you guys, if someone comes to you preaching a different Jesus or a different spirit than you received, or a different gospel, you put up with this beautifully. That's the NASB. Other translations say, like, you're tolerating this. Like, you think that makes you spiritual. It's the verse right before that. He said, I fear for you that you'll be deceived, just like Eve was deceived in the garden, because you're allowing all this other nonsense, if it's just like religious flavored. So there's a sense in which we should be more strict than we actually are. But then there's another sense in which, of course, I want to be open to genuine believers, that we could, as Eric, you cited it before, that we accept one another, and realize sometimes it's just a difference of emphasis. Sometimes it's just a difference of articulation. A lot of the times, a lot of the issues that we've talked about, when we actually have time to hear each other out, like, we realize we're almost talking about the same thing. Like, we're kind of coming at it from different angles. Then you ask, well, like, what's the real difference? Even like with election, like, well, did God foreordain people from eternity past? Whatever. Like, we all still agree they still need to hear the gospel, though, right? And then, like, the gospel itself is the means by which people, like, yeah, okay, so why don't we just do the thing that the Bible's telling us to do, instead of doing the thing that the Bible didn't tell us to do? The Bible never said go into all the world and argue with other believers over what God did, in speculative theology beyond what is written. Like, that's not what he told us to do.
But it's so
anyway,
muge fun.
It is fun. Yeah, it's fun.
Draws
Eric, you were about to say
attention.
something, and I cut you off. I'm sorry
that's
about
okay. No, I'm going to be very transparent today. So there's certain groups where I know I just simply cannot have fellowship with this group. I can't. Can I talk to them? Yes. Can I have fellowship with them? I can't. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. I think they're just outside of what I would consider biblical teaching, to the point where fellowship is just simply not going to be possible. There's other groups where I'm still kind of trying to sort it out, because I guess I don't know enough about the distinctives of the group. Like you mentioned the Roman Catholic Church earlier. I'll be honest, I just don't know enough at this point in time. I mean, there's things where I hear them saying such and such a thing, and I'm going, whoa, I can't go there. I can't hold that position. I just can't do it. It doesn't seem biblical to me. But as far as like everything and how everything connects in the Roman Catholic Church, I don't know enough about it yet to say one way or the other. I just simply don't have an opinion, because I'm still kind of trying to sort all this out. But yeah, are there things that I disagree with? Yes, definitely. Like I said, I'm not Roman Catholic. I'm not going out promoting Roman Catholicism. It's not what I'm doing. So I'm trying to sort it out. But I want to, like I think we should do with all groups, I want to give them a fair hearing. I want to say, okay, what bring to the table what you believe, and then I have to figure out whether I'm going to accept or reject this, or what I'm going to do. I think there's some disagreements I would have with other groups, but I would go, okay, that's at least understandable. Like there's certain Protestant groups that would say you do need to be baptized in order to be saved. Do I hold that position? No. But do I think it's at least understandable? Yes. I can see why someone would hold that position. There are some scriptures that at first glance make it sound that way. Do I hold that position? I don't. But I can at least see why someone would hold that position. But there's other groups where I'm going, like I think it was, I'm not sure which group it is, where they would say like, Jesus never rose from the dead. He came back as a spirit being or something. Okay, no, he didn't. That's not understandable. I don't see how you could hold that view. So I think for me personally, I'm still kind of trying to sort this out when it comes to certain groups. Other groups I already know, like, no, I can't have fellowship with you. Other groups I say, yeah, I don't believe everything you believe, but I can definitely have fellowship with you. That's no problem. Other groups, it's a question mark. um, right now because I simply don't know enough about it. So I want to give every group a fair hearing. Okay, make your case. I'll give you the time, give you the opportunity, make your case, and then I'll sort it out and figure out whether I can have fellowship or not. So I just wanted to end with that because some of the things I've said may seem like kind of wishy washy. Where are you at with this exactly? But I just wanted to clarify that for the sake of unity.
For the sake of unity. So thanks for that clarification. Do you guys, I think I know the answer to this already based on our conversation especially, but I mean, is there a denomination that's got it all right? You think there, have you heard any of these? Obviously, Eric, you don't think it's the one you're part of because you've got at least some disagreements, but, I mean, is there such thing as a denomination that's got it all right, or is you think every single denomination's got at least something wrong?
Greg, go ahead.
Oh, he said Eric.
Oh,
Sorry.
did you
I
say
was waiting
me?
for you. No, for sure.
Well, I just said I know you at least stated that you have some disagreements with your denomination earlier on. I guess Greg has stated that he doesn't fully hold to the particular denominational creed of the London Baptist, anymore. But his denomination, I guess, allows for a bigger view. So I don't know, Greg or Eric, either of you. Do you think there's a perfect denomination out there?
I think I have a perfect view, but unfortunately my denomination is slow in catching up. I don't think that anybody has it perfect. And maybe that's God is intending to use that to teach us more and more. So nope, I don't believe that there's any denomination that has it perfect by any stretch. There are some that are closer, though. There are some that are more right than others. We should pay attention to that.
Well
but
said.
No one has it perfect.
Yeah,
I would say basically the same thing. I don't think any denomination is perfect simply because man is just too flawed to for one person, one founder of a denomination to have it all right. But I do think, like Greg said, I think some are closer than others. I think that's obvious to me. I think some denominations are just flat out wrong. I would just say no. I would steer people away from that one and say no, that they're way, way off. So yeah, some are definitely better than others.
So this is my last question. Then, if you guys have anything else, we can talk about that as well. But based on that, do you think that being part of a denomination, that oftentimes people kind of we stop the desire to continue to reform, right? And I just heard somebody that I respect relatively recently. It was within the last week or so, basically talking about all these people who are deconstructing the faith and kind of rethinking everything and kind of throwing out all the past stuff and saying like, what we don't need to do that. And I agree, we don't need to rethink everything necessarily. I don't need to have a reexamination of whether or not Christ rose from the dead. Like you said, the scripture is so clear. If Christ didn't rise from the dead, you're still dead in your sins, and your faith is worthless, and you of all people are to be more pitied than anyone else. Like, okay, that's pretty hard to misinterpret, at least in my opinion. But then on the other hand, I think that like sometimes we think, okay, all the conversation has been done, and many people who are denominational people, they think our denomination did figure it out, and either Luther got it right, or Calvin got it right, or Wesley got it right, or whatever, and so they have everything right, and we've just kind of stopped doing what Greg said that we should do. We've stopped looking to the scriptures and being willing to say like what needs to change, like what did we get off somewhere? And just because we've done something for a long time, or just because our beliefs have held up for 200 years or 400 years or 1,000 years, does that mean that they're biblical? And so I guess, do you think that denominationalism sometimes kills the desire to continue growing in the faith, to continue growing in even just to, almost nobody would try and do what they did in the first place. Let's have the counsel. Let's have the rigorous conversation. Let's make our own confession. And would we reproduce the Second London Baptist, or would we produce something completely different? Like, if we actually did the primary work, what would we come up with? And that's not saying let's throw everything out and start completely over as if none of that happened. But like even building on that, like if we looked at the scriptures again, what would we produce if we took the rigor instead of the easy path of just saying, let's just rubber stamp this one. Oh yeah, they did it. That's fine. That's what I believe. I believe all that stuff. I learned it in a seminar. It took me one weekend, and I now can articulate all the points, because it took them often decades. Decades of rigorous theological conversation, painstaking research and effort, and then we just rubber stamp it.
I think we have to put ourselves in that position, right? Because we keep talking about this we like it's some static thing. But the fact of the matter is we is constantly changing. The three of us are getting older, and eventually the we is going to be our sons and our daughters. And I think our responsibility is to train them, not to regurgitate and parrot back whatever we've come up with, but instead teach them to perform these investigations and to have these debates and these conversations so that they can reaffirm what we've been right on and reject where we've been wrong and come to better conclusions. Because give it 50 years, it's going to be their kids, and they've got to be prepared to have these conversations. Until Christ returns, we have to be continuously able to reform and reforming where necessary.
That's good. I like that. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, what Greg said was well said. I would say very similar things. We need to be, again, and I keep saying this, but I want to go back to, again, what I said earlier. Okay, be solid on the fundamentals. We need to narrow down, okay, what are the fundamentals? But then there's other things there's other categories of beliefs that I need to be, I'll say, at least have a little bit of skepticism with. Like, and I'll be honest with you guys, doing this podcast for as long as we have now, there were times where I walked away from the conversation going, maybe I need to rethink my position on this. Maybe I need to, maybe not completely throw it away, but maybe I need to fine tune some things that I believe. Maybe maybe there's some things I just need to get rid of and replace with other things. I've really seriously considered that. And even as I've lived my Christian life, as I've studied the Bible, I've studied the Bible more than most, simply because that's what I do. I teach the Bible. So I've had to change some of my views over the years, because I thought, man, I think maybe I was mistaken about that. And after studying this topic for the past year or so, I think maybe I was wrong about that, and I've had to change my mind about certain things. I've never changed my mind about a fundamental, but I've changed my mind on some other things that I believe I was mistaken about. So I think we need to be open to the possibility that we may be wrong about certain things and be humble about it. I know I'm not omniscient. I don't know everything. I'm still learning like everybody else is. I've made mistakes with interpretation in the past. I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. So I'm thankful for that. I think what Greg said, we need to think about the next generation. In our last Bible study we had, it was on Wednesday. We went over, it was John 19, and rather than just telling people, okay, this is what you need to believe about these verses, I challenged them and I said, okay, here is one interpretation. Here's another interpretation of this verse. How would you narrow it down, and how would you figure out which interpretation is correct? So I think helping people figure out how to study the Bible so we can come to a good conclusion is really, really helpful. I think it's really helpful. It's like, if you give a man a fish, that's one thing. If you teach him,
it's necessary.
It is necessary. It is.
Especially for men in your position, it's necessary. It's your God-given job, and if you're failing to do it, well, you'll answer for that.
Yeah.
And as fathers, right? So that's not just pastors, right? Let's extend this to the. It is my God-given responsibility to teach my kids how to be good Bereans, right? And to obey that. And so, should I fail to do that, I'm going to answer for that. So, I want to teach my kids how to come to the correct interpretation and application, not just teach them what the correct interpretation and application is.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. Teaching people how to study the Bible is vital. So we have to do that, keeping in mind, okay, I could be wrong about things. I need to continue studying and always be striving to arrive at the truth the best that I can.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's well said. I don't have any other questions. You guys got anything that you were hoping to talk about when in this fairly broad topic of denominations? Anything that we didn't cover? We don't need to belabor the points we've already said, but anything you were hoping to chat about denominations, positives, negatives, strengths, weaknesses, that kind of stuff before we say goodbye for another episode?
I don't think so.
I think I've covered
Close
everything.
it out. Let's bring it home.
Covered it all. Eric covered it all. So that's very good. Well, again, if you're still watching, let us know your thoughts on denominations. Are there positives? Are there negatives? Is there one true denomination? Which one is right about everything in your opinion? We'd love to know if you put that down
Please.
there down below. If you like this episode, click that thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, hey, consider subscribing. It helps out our channel. It's free for you, and that'll help Eric and Greg and I be happy and feel good about ourselves because we know that we're doing something important because we're making a dent in the YouTube universe or whatever. Just so you know, our self-worth is not actually tied to that at all, but you could do it if you wanted to. Otherwise, until we see you again, what we're more passionate about is that you would get equipped, that you would obey your King, and that you would glorify your God.
Amen.
Be honest, Greg, you throw rocks at the other church building and you know if you can hit it or not. You guys have a once every month that there's a fifth Sunday, it's rock throwing Sunday, and you guys go out and see if you can hit the other building.